The national security trial against 3 Tiananmen vigil organizers begins, with 2 of them denying subversion charges and a third pleading guilty. Coroner in the Lamma ferry crash verdict calls routine ship plan checks unrealistic, leaving victims' families disappointed. And US President Donald Trump says a potential deal on Greenland is in sight and drops tariff threats against Europe. Good evening, you're watching Cable News. I'm Quentin Yan. The trial of the now-defunct Hong Kong Alliance in support of patriotic, democratic movements of China under the national security law began today, with the alliance and former leader Lee Chok-yan and Chow Han-tong pleading not guilty to inciting subversion of state power, while Albert Ho entered a guilty plea and was found guilty by the court. Cheryl Yun reports.
The 3 Tiananmen vigil organizers Li, Ho and Chow were brought to the West Kowloon law courts in prison vans. Along with the alliance itself, they faced charges of inciting subversion under Hong Kong's national security law between July 1, 2020 and September 8, 2021. In court, Li, Chow and the alliance entered not guilty pleas, while Ho pleaded guilty. Prosecutors outlined that the alliance, since its founding, had openly advocated for ending China's one-party rule. They argued this objective directly contravenes the Chinese constitution, which enshrines the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party as a defining feature of the country's system of government. The prosecution contended that seeking to end one-party rule therefore amounts to subverting state power. They further alleged that the group had repeatedly used calls for democracy and its annual June 4th vigils in Victoria Park as vehicles to carry out subversive activities. The court found Ho guilty, noting that he continued to call for an end to one-party rule in China even after the national security law came into effect in June 2020. The prosecution is expected to formally open its case against Li, Chow and the alliance on Monday. Cheryl Yun, Cable News.
During the second day of verdict hearing into the 2012 Lamma ferry crash, the coroner said it was unrealistic to expect marine officials to verify ship plans at routine checks. The victims' families were disappointed with the court's findings. Jimmy Liu reports.
The coroner's court finished delivering the oral verdict on the inquest into one of Hong Kong's deadliest maritime disasters, which killed 39 people. One of the inquiries looked into the accountability during the Marine Department's 8 routine inspections of Lamma IV. Lawyers for victims' families suspected these were missed opportunities to find the ferry does not match its plans, specifically an absent watertight door. On this point, Coroner Monica Chow said verifying a ship's design with its plans should happen at the initial inspection of a new vessel, and it would be unrealistic for inspectors to do so at every routine check that follows, not to mention the heavy daily workload. The statement upset the families, who left the court before the hearing ended. The coroner concluded that the disaster had reflected systemic insufficiency within the Marine Department, which she said failed to perform thorough checks regarding ship plans approval and safety data calculations. Chow made several suggestions, including requiring shipyards to report any modifications on vessels to the Marine Department. She also advised the department set up a reporting system to regulate refitting projects and review seafarers' working hours and rest times with operators. The victims' families were extremely disappointed with the verdict. They were frustrated by the coroner's stance on ship inspections and dismissal of their claims that a structural feature, a watertight door, was missing. Alice Leung, who lost her brother in the tragedy, said one reason they pursued the inquest was to learn who was accountable, but it left her and members of the public with 100,000 questions after 13 years. The family said they would not give up. Only by uncovering the truth quickly can Hong Kong find closure and move forward, Leung said. Jamie Liu, Cable News.
A sharp winter chill has tightened its grip on Hong Kong, with the city's second cold weather warning of 2026 remaining in force. Hong Kongers woke up to a distinctly cold and gray morning with a brisk wind making temperatures feel even lower than the mercury. The urban areas dropped to around 12 degrees Celsius, prompting warnings to bundle up. The chill was even more pronounced in the new territories. Areas including Takulin and Shanshui saw temperatures plunge to below 10 degrees, with other northern districts hovering around the 10-degree mark. The observatory forecasts the cold weather will persist for the next couple of days, with the current cold spell expected to last through the weekend, before a gradual warming trend begins early next week. The Center for Health Protection has issued an urgent reminder for the public, especially the elderly and those with chronic illnesses, to take precautions against the health risks posed by the cold. In a sudden U-turn, United States President Donald Trump ruled out the use of force to seize Greenland and dropped tariff threats against 8 European nations. He claimed the U.S. is exploring a potential deal with NATO on the Danish territory, but kept up its complaints about European allies. Jamie Liu reports.
At the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Trump vowed not to use force to acquire the Arctic island, having refused to rule it out until yesterday. Still, his speech was filled with grievances toward European allies. He even slammed Denmark as ungrateful to the U.S.
It's hard to call it land. It's a big piece of ice. But we saved Greenland and successfully prevented our enemies from gaining a foothold in our hemisphere. Without us, right now you'd all be speaking German and a little Japanese, perhaps. After the war, we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that? But we did it.
He continued to make his case that the U.S. needs Greenland for national security and called for immediate negotiations for acquisition. Trump later met NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte for talks. In a social media post, Trump called off the 10% import tax on 8 European countries and said a framework of a future deal on Arctic security was reached. Revealing some of the details, the U.S. president said a potential deal could be forever, involving his Golden Dome missile defense system and mineral rights for the U.S. However, it remains unclear what kind of deal could meet Trump's desire for ownership. Rutte told Fox News that he and Trump did not discuss Greenland's sovereignty. A NATO spokesperson said talks between Denmark, Greenland, and the U.S. would go forward aimed at ensuring Russia and China never gain a foothold in Greenland economically or militarily. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen welcomed news that Trump has paused the trade war over Greenland. He said the issue should be handled through private diplomacy rather than on social media, and demanded respect for Denmark's sovereignty and Greenlandic people's right to self-determination. Jamie Liu, Cable News.
Despite U.S. President Donald Trump's pivot in not using force to take the semi-autonomous territory, Greenlanders are not letting down their guard. In fact, Greenland's government unveiled a new handbook offering advice to its residents in case of a crisis in the territory. Sloan has the story.
Already in the works after a power outage across the capital city of Nuuk last year, the survival guide does not reference any threat from the U.S., but its release time coincided with the heightened security felt across the territory brought about by Trump's threat. Officials called it an insurance policy, with guidance such as stockpiling basic supplies good for at least 5 days, including food, water, and toilet rolls, along with hunting weapons and ammunition. Unable to just breathe a sigh of relief, many Greenlanders have already heeded the advice.
Maybe just in case if something happens, that we are ready to, or just be prepared to survive.
Another resident went to buy a camping stove and mashed potatoes, which you can just add water to.
A few years ago, Nuuk were out of power for a few days, so that was a little bit of a taster of how it can be. And of course, living in this nature, you have to be prepared for almost anything. And now there's another threat, that's Trump, so I don't think he's gonna turn down the power supplies. But just in case, we want to be prepared as well.
Best Learn Cable News.
Another shooting in Australia has left 3 dead and 1 seriously wounded in a New South Wales town. On the same day, the nation paused to mourn the 15 victims of last month's Bondi Beach terrorist attack. The shooting occurred in the town of Lake Cargelligo local time Thursday afternoon. Local media reports that the incident was a suspected domestic violence attack. The shooting interrupts a somber national day of mourning, declared by the Australian government to honor those killed and injured in the anti-Semitic terrorist attack at Bondi Beach last December. Across Australia, the public has been asked to observe a minute of silence at 7 p.m. Flags have flown at half-mast on government buildings and landmarks. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has encouraged all Australians to perform an act of kindness to honor the victims and stand in solidarity with the Jewish community. Iran has announced for the first time that more than 3,000 people were killed in last month's nationwide protests, a figure human rights groups contest as a significant undercount. The state television released the official toll of 3,117 on Wednesday, stating that over 70% of the dead were civilians and security forces, but did not identify the remaining casualties. The announcement follows weeks of internet blackouts and reporting restrictions, making independent verification extremely difficult. However, international activists dispute the figures. The US-based human rights activists news agency put the death toll at a minimum of 4,902, with many more feared dead. Activists also report that nearly 26,500 people have been arrested, raising fears of mass executions. The United States has been pledging intervention, sending its USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier group toward the Middle East. In a direct threat, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warned in the Wall Street Journal that Iran would fire back with everything we have if the US launches an attack. Now let's take a look at the stock market. The Hang Seng Index closed 44 points higher. Top active stocks of the day: Tencent was down $5, Alibaba was up $1.60. Xiaomi was down 18 cents, while PopMart was up $11.60. Foreign exchange against the Hong Kong dollar: Euro 9.12, Japanese yen 49.18. Hong Kong's inflation picked up pace last month, driven largely by the increasing cost of travel and getting around. Official data shows the consumer price index rose by 1.4% in December year-on-year, surpassing market forecasts and exceeding November's 1.2% rise. Netting out all government's one-off relief measures, the underlying inflation rate similarly quickened to 1.2% from 1% a month earlier. The larger increase was attributed primarily to higher charges for package tours and inbound and outbound transport fares. Nevertheless, the government characterized the December inflation as modest, noting that price pressures across major components remain broadly in check. Officials anticipate overall inflation will stay mild in the near term, given subdued domestic and external cost pressures. For all of 2025, the city's overall inflation averaged 1.4%, with the underlying rate averaging 1.1%. On to the weather now. Mainly cloudy, cold tonight and tomorrow morning. Dry with bright periods during the day. Temperatures will range between 12 and 17 degrees. And that's our news tonight. I'm Quentin Yan. Thank you for watching. Good night.